What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Enjoying the Review. I'm your host, Incomparable Zach Jones, and today I'm going to be reviewing and recapping the latest episode of Severance, which is Severance Season 2, Episode 7, entitled Shikai Bardo. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but nonetheless, that's what it is. Guys, before I get into things, I want to remind everybody to please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Leave thumbs up, comments, positive reviews, all that good stuff. You can also listen in audio form on your podcast catcher of choice, and you can follow me on social media on Twitter or Blue Sky at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. All right, guys, let's get into it. I actually really love this episode. I think it might be one of my top two favorite episodes this season. I think I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I really like this. First of all, we got a lot of revelations this episode, and much like episode 4, where we got where the group found out that Helena was posing as Helly, and I was like, oh wow, I was surprised they revealed that this soon. We also got a similar thing this episode where I'm like, oh, I thought this would be saved for even further down this season, maybe even the last episode, and we got it in this episode, which was really cool. I think we got a really good hint at something that Lumen is up to. Not their full master plan, but I think we definitely got a big slice of the pie of that this episode, which is cool. And I'll talk about that a little further in a little bit. Also, we finally got a Gemma-focused episode, which was cool. We've been getting teases of her all season, and sort of finally kind of get an episode focused around her, learn more about her and Marc's backstory, learn more about her as a character and where she's at now. It was very cool. I enjoyed that. And I also noted lots of symmetry this episode from a storytelling perspective. Like, for example, there's several instances of you'll hear a piece of dialogue between two characters, and then later on in the episode, that same dialogue will be reflected with two different characters. And there's just a lot of symmetrical moments like that during the episode that I noticed. Okay, guys, before I get into the recap, so full spoilers here. I wanted to talk about something off the bat that I think was one of my big takeaways from this episode. So I mentioned it seemed like we know a little more about what Lumen is up to. So during this episode, we can see that they're experimenting with Gemma, where they sever her, have her experience something unpleasant like dental work, a really turbulent flight, and then they unsever her and see if her Audi has any memories of what happened. And so my thought is that they are trying to create a product for the public where basically, oh, you get this chip in your head and then you can sever yourself and basically cut out all the mundane and or unpleasant things in life and just experience the good stuff. I think that's what they're trying to market. Now, of course, I think they're also, their goal ultimately is to get a Lumen chip inside everybody's head, and they will use that to try to control them in some way for some, either as labor or some nefarious purpose. But I think the way they're going to try to entice people to get that chip, and let's be honest, it would be enticing. Imagine if you could just, anytime you were going to have to do something unpleasant, you could flip that switch and it'd be over right away. It's an appealing notion. So I'm curious what you guys think, but that's kind of my takeaway. The other thing is, so we'll find out in this episode that it seems like Gemma was kind of preyed upon by Lumen, and they chose her because her and Marc were having troubles conceiving. And I don't know for sure, but I'm wondering if that is also going to play a part into, Lumen's, ultimate plan. I don't know exactly how that would fit in, but it does seem peculiar that, they chose her, and it seems like that's maybe a contributing factor. So yeah, I'm curious what you guys think about those revelations, but that's kind of what I got out of it. But there's actually a lot more to dig into this episode as well. So with that in mind, guys, let's get into the recap. So this episode starts off with a flashback of where Marc and Gemma first met. They met in line, both giving blood. And I think they're both teachers, and they were kind of like grading papers, or at least Marc was. Gemma mentions a book here. I forget the title. It was like The Death of Someone. But again, that symmetry I'm telling you about, that book will be referenced later on. Also, speaking of symmetry, and by the way, this episode jumps around a lot in time. We get a lot of flashbacks of her and Marc in the past, as well as her in present day in Lumen, as well as Marc in present day going through what he's going through. But there's a scene where we'll find out that it's at Lumen. I don't think necessarily know it right off the bat, because again, they were at the blood bank. But this nurse is taking her blood. By the way, I think that actress, what's her name? Sandra Bernhardt? Is that right? She used to be like on Roseanne, like way back in the day, and she's been on a lot of things, but I haven't seen her in a while, it seems like. And while she's getting blood taken, Gemma kind of is, spacing out. And then nurse asks, where'd you go, Gemma? Or where? I think something along those lines. Where'd you go? Where you went, or whatever. And that's going to be repeated later on in the episode. Again, symmetry. We get also like just a quick scene of Marc and Gemma in bed together, showing their relationship progressing. So now back in the present. So Marc, at the end of last episode, passed out from the reintegration process. He is still passed out, and so Devin is freaking out, and we get a good performance by that actress that plays his sister. She's very nervous about Marc, but the doctor tells her that Marc is going to be okay, and she tells her what's going on, that Marc is reintegrating, and this really upsets Devin. But the doctor tells her, first of all, confirms to her that Gemma is alive, which, kind of like, shocks her. And then says that because of that, reintegration was what Marc wants. So now we're in present day, and Lumen is giving Gemma a bunch of medical and kind of mental cognitive tests. And Gemma asks the nurse how many rooms today, and the nurse replies 6. So we'll find out what that means, but we're like, they're building the mystery here. So she opens her wardrobe, and this will happen many times in this episode, where like she opens it and like she's going to have to put on some sort of outfit, So she puts on this dress and she follows the nurse. So I found this curious. So they pass several rooms, and all the rooms have little name tags on them. And the tags seem to correspond to like a geographic location, which is also interesting, but I don't know if that actually means something in the great scheme of things. So the first one she walks past is a place called Allentown. And also these names seem to correspond to the folders that the MDR crew are working on. And I believe, Marc has that little holographic thing on his desk And I believe that says Allentown on there. Like, so maybe that's like a file that he closed or whatever. Other signs they passed one called Cairns, another one called Drainsville, Sienna, Loveland, Wellington, and Wellington room ends up being her first stop in the first room she actually goes into. So when she enters this room, it does the thing. She's going through the severance process. And also, I get the feeling through conversation that she must be severed into like a different person in every room, like a distinct one, not just like an outie and an innie, not like one outie and several innies rather than like one outie, one innie, which is interesting because when she enters this room, we get the so the whistling man that took the dentistry gear in the one episode, he shows up here, and he's this doctor posing as a dentist here. And, I found it curious that they went through great lengths to obscure his face in the earlier episode, because I don't think he's a character we've been introduced to previously. Is he? Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I don't remember ever seeing him. So Gemma asks if she can have a break, and he tells her it's been 6 weeks, and she says she was just here. And so obviously the severed process for her, it would be like the last time she left the room, she just entered it again. But this is what also makes me think that she has a different innie for every room, because otherwise she would have experienced more time because she would have been in all the other scenarios. So it seems to me that, she must have an innie for every single room. So he tells her that he knows that for her, it was like she was just here, but asked her to take a seat. And he starts doing dentistry work on her. So now we flash to her exiting that room, and the nurse tells her that her innie was in the dentist office for 2 hours. And of course, for her, it's like no time passed. And that's what I'm saying. Between this and the other thing that they're going to do, it definitely seems like, that's what Lumen's trying to do, is create a product where people can sever anytime, they're about to do something they don't want to do. They can sever, and it'll be like it just is magically done. There's another sign called Rhodes, Rhodes. And then she passes a room labeled Cold Harbor. Dun dun dun. So now we're back at Marc's place. Devin cries over Marc's body and, rooting for him to wake up. So now we get a kind of a flashback to him and Gemma's budding relationship. So we get the scene where he buys her an ant farm because she mentioned she liked ants, and she's like, "Oh, I said plants, not ants. I hate ants." And they have this like kind of not a meet cute because they already met, I guess. But in another flashback, we see Marc buys a crib, and of course we know from the previous season, Marc mentioned that they had trouble conceiving a child. I don't exactly remember how he put it, but there was definitely a reference set up for it. And we just kind of get a lovely montage of their relationship throughout the years. I watched the little at the end of the. If you stay after the credits, they have a little thing where they discuss the episode, and they I think they mentioned that like we're seeing like a 5-year period of their relationship from when they meet to when Gemma, gets in the car wreck. So during a visit between Marc, Gemma, Devin, and Rickon, Gemma refuses to drink alcohol, signifying to Devin that she's pregnant. But then right after that, we get a scene where Gemma loses the body. She starts bleeding. She gets in the shower. Marc shows up to, try to comfort her. And this scene transitions to the scene from season 1 where Miss Casey was talking to Marc in the MDR room when she came to the MDR room to watch Helly. Okay, so this is another interesting thing, and I don't know what to make of this exactly. So we basically find out that there are other Lumen workers who basically constantly monitor the MDR workers. And it's almost like they're watching them through their computer screens. And they kind of show the close-up, like, the computer buttons being pushed and the numbers being sorted here. And I don't know, honestly, if that was meant like just to be the activity of the MDR workers, or if perhaps these guys are doing a similar thing. I don't really know. It's a little unclear, but it is interesting that, they're being monitored that closely. And also kind of Mr. Drummond is in this room, and he's kind of overseeing everybody in this room and what they're doing. And I think there's dialogue where he's like, is everything going to plan? And one of the guys says, like, the severance barriers are holding. So definitely an interesting scene, and I don't totally know what to make of it. We get a flashback of Gemma and Marc going to a doctor's appointment, and they're trying to find, I guess, alternative means of conceiving. But they're in a waiting room, and then this transitions to Gemma being in kind of a similar looking waiting room, but in Lumen and by herself. Gemma has a vision of the dark hallway and then the tree where she supposedly, wrecked her car, although we haven't seen that yet. We then get a flash where Marc injects Gemma with something. I'm thinking that must be, they're trying to increase their chances of conceiving. So it has to do with that, I guess. So the doctor, the dentist from earlier, he asked Gemma a series of questions. So first he asked, what room made your mouth hurt? And she says the Wellington room. So that's the one where the dentistry stuff was done. He asked her how many rooms she visited, and she replies 6. It's curious to me. A part of me wonders if she did go to the Cold Harbor room and for some reason has absolutely no recollection of that. But I'm not sure. I just find it curious that, like, the nurse set up that thing with the 6 rooms, and then she's saying it here, but then it's like, it seemed like he was testing her to, like, does she remember the, I don't know if that's the case, but I found it curious that was one of his questions. So he's like, yeah, you were in 6 rooms. He replies, the Billings room, the Lucknow room, St. Pierre, Cairns, Zurich, and Wellington. She tells him she remembers nothing of what happened in the rooms. He asks her if she felt any emotions in the hallway coming out of the other rooms. And then she quickly changes the subject and says there's only one room she hasn't been in yet. And today it has a name on it, Cold Harbor. And again, maybe she hasn't been in that room, but maybe she has. I don't know. Mystery. She asks what happens after she's been to all of the rooms, and he says that she will see the world again, and the world will see her. I'm not sure I know what to make of that statement exactly. I don't really have any good theories on it. Curious if you guys do. She asked if she will see Marc, and he says Marc will benefit from the world she is siring. Also interesting. Like I said, the world she is siring, I think in his mind means like they're going to get chips in everybody's head and do whatever they do. He says that cure will take away all of Marc's pain just as it has taken away all of hers. I like this line because it kind of speaks for the audience as well. She goes, "Can't you just talk like a normal person?" But instead of doing that, he just tells her, good night and sweet dreams. So in another flashback, it seems that Gemma, to her dismay, discovers that she's once again not pregnant. So now we're back at Marc's house. The doctor tells Devin that Marc is stable and he will wake up when he's ready to. Devin tells the doctor about the birthing cabin in season 1 where she noticed the lady got severed to give birth. And she asked if maybe they can take Marc there so she can talk to his innie. Because she thinks reintegration is dangerous and is ultimately going to get Marc killed if they keep, doing it. So this causes friction between Devin and the doctor, and Devin's like, well, you know what? Maybe I'll call Harmony Cobell, because she might know what to do. And the doctor, tries to tell her that's a terrible idea. She is a soldier of Lumen, and, you'll be dooming, Marc. And Devin's like, you know what? I am going to call. And so the doctor picks up her stuff and leaves. Now, Devin doesn't end up calling her. So, maybe the doctor could have found out for sure if she was going to before leaving. And I thought that was maybe a little bit weird. So Devin starts monitoring Marc again. And in his sleep, or, whatever state he's in, he starts saying the phrase Shikai Bardo, which again is the title of this episode. And this transitions to a flashback with him and Gemma. Now, I found this interesting. So he reads that on a card that Gemma has. And this card is similar to the card that Dylan stole in season 1 that caused, Milchick to use the OTC. That's how he found out about the OTC, to go to his Audi's house and get that card back because it was like so important. And so she says that this card represents ego death because it has a guy like fighting with himself. And then she mentions that she received this card in the mail, and she thinks she got it on a mailing list from the clinic. So I found this very interesting, because I think we're going to find out that those cards in some way have a mental effect on people. Like maybe in a way it conditions them. Because like these cards seem so innocuous, but we know because of how the length Milchick went to get the card back in season 1, these cards have to have some power to them. And I think that has to be a key. Like these cards somehow can condition someone's mind. And I don't know if that makes them susceptible to suggestion or what it does exactly. But I found that interesting. And again, I found it interesting that her connection to receiving the card was the clinic. And, I don't know. Again, I don't know how if the not being able to conceive thing factors in, or the pregnancy thing factors, because we know from season 1 that, yes, some people do get severed to give birth and stuff like that. But I don't know. I thought this was one of the more intriguing aspects of this episode. Like, what do the cards do exactly? Why did they choose her to send one to? That I like that mystery, and I'm not sure where it's going. We also, in that scene, they kind of bicker back and forth, and we get the sense that their relationship now is feeling tension over her not being able to conceive, and they're both kind of getting highly stressed, and it's just bringing a lot of tension to their marriage and their relationship. So now we see Gemma get severed again, and now she's on like a very bumpy flight, which I assume is like, it's got to be like a flight simulator in like the Lumen basement or something. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the doctor, the dentist from earlier, he is disguised as like a stewardess, flight attendant, whatever, on this airplane. We also find out another scene with Mr. Drummond that Marc is stuck on 96% completion of Cold Harbor. Drummond tells. So in this room now with Drummond is not only the 4 people monitoring the MDR workers, but this doctor, and he tells him that he's going to have to say goodbye to Gemma soon, and he's like, I know. So we get the sense that this doctor, Gemma's kind of his lab rat, and he's got an attachment to her, and doesn't, like, a creepy attachment, and probably doesn't want to let her go, but knows that time is coming. And in this scene, that same doctor is wearing like a ugly Christmas sweater. Speaking of which, Gemma gets severed again, and she joins this man in a Christmas themed room. I believe the reference later is Allentown, and she's having to handwrite this like thank you letter to, this guy's boss, and I found it curious, like, her handwriting is like really terrible, and so I'm thinking like maybe part of the being severed in the way she is, like, she's not totally accessing like the part of her brain that would normally, like, write a letter normally, which that's also interesting, like, that the severance process can possibly interrupt how your brain would otherwise function if you weren't severed. So I kind of like that detail. So the doctor is now in this scene is wearing like fake facial hair. But again, if she has a different like innie in every room, it doesn't necessarily seem like he'd have to go through that, unless maybe he was worried that there would be some sort of bleed through and she would recognize him. She complains to him about like writing the letter, and he's like, it's Christmas or whatever, and she complains that it's always Christmas. Before she leaves, he tells her, I love you, and then he forces her to say, I love you too. In another flashback, Marc struggles to put together the crib that he bought. There's also a scene of them at Christmas time where they're like, cuddling with each other and seemingly getting along. So we find out that this doctor character that we've seen all episode long, his name is Dr. Maurer. Gemma tells him that her hand hurt and the room that caused it is Allentown. So Allentown must be the Christmas room. She tells him that she wants to go home and tells her that she tells him that she wants to go home. He tells her that Marc remarried last year and that he has a daughter now. And she tells him that she does not believe him. He asked her if she gravitated towards any one of the rooms more than the others, and that maybe she felt that things behind those doors, maybe she felt things behind those doors that she never felt with Marc. He then takes out a book, which is that same book Gemma referenced early on, the death of whoever. And while he's looking at that book, Gemma knocks him out over the head with a chair and, exits the room. So she sees the elevator, the dark hallway elevator in the distance, but then she starts to hear the nurse's footsteps. So she kind of runs and hides from the nurse, but then she makes a break for the elevator, and because she makes more noise, the nurse hears her and starts chasing her, but she's able to get on the elevator, and it closes. I will say it seems like she could have just not ran so fast and the nurse probably wouldn't have heard her. But she gets on this elevator and she goes through the severance process. And so when the elevator dings and she gets out, actually, let me see. Oh, actually, first before that, we get a flashback of Gemma leaving for a party where Marc stays at home. And so I'm sure I, like everyone else, figured, oh, okay, this is the night she quote unquote died or got in a wreck, and we get another symmetry callback here where she tells Marc, I love you. He doesn't answer. And she's like, I love you too. And, gets him to say it. Okay. So back in the present, Gemma walks down the dark hallway and is greeted by Mr. Milchek, who refers to her as Miss Casey. So now she is in the Miss Casey persona again. She asks him what is happening. And he says that her Audi came to the building for a public arts exhibition and found herself in the wrong elevator. And then Milchek convinces her to begrudgingly to go back in the elevator. And she kind of turns around several times and starts to ask questions. And he's like, no, please get back on the elevator. And you can tell she doesn't want to, but at the same time, she's kind of programmed to listen to Milchek. So she ends up getting back on the elevator. So in another flashback, Marc is up late at his house, and he sees a car headlights approaching the house, and we can tell he's kind of what's going on. Back at Lumen, the elevator in the basement opens back up, and Gemma is kind of surprised and dismayed to find out, because for her it's she got in the elevator, she's like, oh, I'm gonna escape, and then it opened back up and she's right there again looking at the nurse. So back to Marc at his house, we find out that the car that approached was actually a cop car, and cops are about to break the bad news to him about Gemma. I am curious, I think we're going to find out that, the car wreck was all staged. These cops are probably in on it to a degree as well. And then they probably put a beat up car at the scene or something like that. Of course, we don't get that in this episode. Maybe they don't have to answer that, and we can just leave it to our imaginations. But I assume something along those lines happened. Although we did get that scene earlier in the season where Marc said he identified her body. So, curious how. I mean, I guess I could have just like drugged her or something, but maybe they'll show that that sequence in another episode. So now, speaking of symmetry, they kind of put together Gemma's reaction of being back in the basement in the elevator, and Marc's reaction when he sees the cops approaching. And you just see in this moment, they both look like all hope is lost. They both look utterly defeated. So I kind of like that moment of symmetry as well. So Marc wakes up finally and is greeted by Devon. And she asks him where'd you go? Which again is a symmetrical callback to the beginning of the episode when the nurse asked Gemma that same thing. And then he just kind of has a vision of Gemma, first like in a library and then like a close-up on her eyes. And that's where the episode ends. So yeah, great episode. Like I said, very interesting revelations in this episode. It was great to see more of Gemma, and that actress, finally got to, show off her skills as well. And she did a great job, I thought. Yeah, I thought it was one of the more interesting episodes of the season. I really liked this episode. But guys, what do you think? Do you have any crazy conspiracy theories now that you've seen this episode? Whatever you think, comment down below. Let me know. And as always, please likes, comments, subscribe, review, all that good stuff. And if you like, you can follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. But guys, until next time, I hope you're enjoying the review. Bye, guys.